Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Light Gate. We are coming to you today from the beautiful city of New Orleans at the United Public Radio Network at 107.7 and the United Paranormal Radio Network at 105.3. We are on Roku and we are on, what do you call it?
Rumble?
YouTube and a lot of other platforms. Roku, we know you can't see us, you only hear us. So we promise when our picture's coming up, we're going to endeavor to describe it fully to you so you understand what's going on right along with us.
Yes, and we're streaming from 107.7 FM and 105.3 on the United Public Radio Network from the beautiful city of New Orleans, and the UFO Paranormal Radio Network on 105.3. So I'm super excited about our guest tonight. But before we introduce her, I just want to say hi to all of you lovely people in chat. I see a lot of familiar names here and faces. Doxy, really happy to see you here. Hey, Dolly, you're there in chat. Hi, Dolly.
Hello.
Neural Channels says, woohoo, Dolly. Yay. Chewy, there's Christopher Harmon. Scuba Maru, always great to see you here. Louise, love to see all you regulars here. That's awesome. There's Ruth Kleber. You never told me how to pronounce your name, if that's Kleber or Kleiber, but I'm going to go with Kleber. Hope that's right. Dawn, hi Dawn. Allison Carr. Brian Morgan, awesome to see you here. Thirsty. Let's see, who else do we have? Jay Truth Seekers, Janice Cornett. Oh, Susan. Hi, Susan. So excited to see you. Terry. Oh, Izzy Beth. Always awesome to see you, Izzy Beth. Martin Rivera, our former guest, whose show was very popular. We're going to be bringing him back. Hi, Martin. Let's see, who else? There's a lot of you guys. John Manro, Gia. Linus Sutherland says, hiya. And I don't think I can pronounce this one. DeJeskra? Excuse me, DeJeskra, if I didn't get that right. Fun Talks TV, 1R Wedding says, love you guys. Love you too. Joan, OA2. Hi, Joan. Vibe Align. So yeah, awesome to see all you here in chat. We're super excited. Our show is really beginning to take off. This is episode number 11, and we are having fun, aren't we, Dolly?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and I'm excited about this guest. She's someone who's been in the field for a very long time. I consider her a superstar and a true pioneer in this field. And her name is Dr. Irena McCammon Scott. I'm so excited. She is actually a scientist, pioneering UFO researcher and author. And her resume is just amazing. As I said, she's been in this field for many years. She received her Ph.D. from the University of Missouri College of Veterinary Medicine and did post-doctoral research at Cornell University and has had a professorship at St. Bonaventure University. Now, her MS was from the University of Nevada and her BS from Ohio State University in astronomy and biology. And she has done research and teaching at the Ohio State University College of Medicine and the University of Nevada. So we're talking to someone tonight who has some real extensive knowledge in the sciences. And listen to this. The Defense Intelligence Agency, the DIA, employed her in a PhD level research in satellite photography, including in the Air Order of the Battle section of its Photographic Interpretation Office, which involved aircraft identification with above top secret sensitive compartmented information clearance. So there might be some stuff we're just not going to be allowed to hear, but it's awesome to know that someone's worked with aircraft identification in this field in particular. So Dr. Scott was also employed as a physical scientist cartographer in the DMA Aerospace Center, which is now the National Geospatial-Intelligence Agency, using satellite photography. And she worked at the Battelle Memorial Institute. And if you know about UFO history, that's significant. And this resume is amazing. I can't wait to talk to you, Irena. She has been sent for work-related purposes to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base and has been in the secured areas, including the Blue Room building. This is the NASIC. So Wright-Patterson is a huge part of the whole UFO field, where a lot of foreign technology is tested and identified. But Dr. Irena McCammon Scott was an astronomer at the Ohio State University Radio Observatory, the Big Ear, which is noted for the WOW SETI signal that might be humanity's only signal from ET gathered so far in terms of radio waves. She is an amateur astronomer and also has taken flying lessons. She was actually a correspondent for Popular Mechanics magazine. And of course, she's written some really well-received books and works in peer-reviewed scientific journals, magazines, and newspapers. And in fact, her photography has been shown on television and in magazines, books, and newspapers. I know I'm going on and on about her, but I really think it's important you know her history because she has served on the MUFON Board of Directors. MUFON, of course, being the Mutual UFO Network. That was from 1993 to 2000, and is a MUFON consultant in physiology and astronomy, and of course, a field investigator herself. She was actually a founding member of the Mid-Ohio Research Associates, MORA, and an editor for the Ohio UFO Notebook. Her publications have included articles in the MUFON UFO Journal, International UFO Reporter, and Fate magazine, which is really cool. I've had articles in those as well. Well, maybe not the International UFO Reporter. I don't think they ever accepted any of my stuff. But Dr. Scott was a keynote speaker at the 2022 5th Symposium on UFOlogy and Exobiology International Symposium in Brazil, and a featured speaker at the 2019 50th Anniversary International MUFON Symposium, the 22nd Annual UFO Festival in McMinnville, Oregon. Oh, I still want to go there one of these days. The UFOCon in San Francisco. Hey, Dolly, we went to that one. And she was invited to be a featured speaker at the UFO Mega Conference in 2022 in Las Vegas, which was canceled. Oh, really? I did not know that. I think we spoke there I did in 2021. At any rate, I'm wrapping it up here. She has done numerous podcasts on such places as Coast to Coast and Shirley MacLaine's Independent Expression Radio, and many others, including, of course, tonight on episode 11 of The Light Gate. So I'm sorry to go on and on about you, Irena. I don't mean to embarrass you, but thank you so much for coming onto the show tonight.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
Hey, it's our pleasure. Yeah, Dolly's researched you and she's like, we got to get this lady on. And I instantly, of course, recognized your name because, yeah, I've been in this field since 1986. And I think you were around back then as well. Is that right?
I think I started a little later than that.
All right. Well, gosh, what a resume you have. So I'm not even sure where to start. But I always kind of like to start when people were little kids. And if you don't mind, I'm just curious. I'm curious by nature. Like, how did you get involved in, all these science research and particularly into UFOs? And did you start having any UFO experiences as a young kid or moving forward?
Yes, I did. And in science, you're not exactly supposed to be into UFOs. And so I contained it and didn't say anything about it for a number of years. I mean, quite a few years during my career. But I started out, my sister and I had experience when we were real young. Like I was about 6 and she was about 4.
Oh, wow.
And it was years before we ever heard of UFOs or anything like that. So we didn't know what it was for a long time. And even when we did find out about UFOs, we still didn't know it. But we had something in our bedroom when we were children.
Ooh, well, that's significant.
It was like a little ball of, it was a very tiny little thing, and it looked like hot iron or something. It was just a little tiny thing, like like a literal tic tac or whatever. And it was flying around the room, and I woke up and this thing was flying around the room, and it was nothing like a lightning bug or anything. It was lit all the time. It looked like hot metal. And at that young age, I noticed that it didn't bump into anything. It would go toward a wall and then it'd turn. It'd go around furniture and stuff. And it seemed to know where things were. The room was dark. It was night. And it wasn't storming or anything. There's reasons why I know that. My whole family knew it after a while because we were told about it. We didn't know it was UFOs, so we didn't, nobody said, "Shut up, this is UFOs," for quite a few years. But it flew around the room and it got kind of close to both of us. And then it flew up toward the ceiling and it turned before it got to the ceiling. And it was an attic room with walls that came together and then a thing in the middle. And it flew down the middle of the thing. There was a chandelier in the middle. And without feeling its way around or anything, it came to the chandelier right between the chandelier and the wall, and it began circling the chandelier. And it circled for a long time. And then it came down a spiral, just exactly sort of getting smaller and smaller until it was just about exactly under the chandelier. And then I didn't know my sister was awake even, but suddenly we both became absolutely terrified and tried to run out of the room, except we bumped into each other and fell down the stairs. And then we had to open the stair door and we were scrambling in our terror and we couldn't get the door open. And finally we did. And so we ran to our parents screaming and shrieking. And they said, it didn't really happen.
Oh,
They didn't believe us.
Wow, that's a shame. I've heard that so many times where parents just don't believe their children. I'm wondering, why was it scary? I mean, what about it scared you?
I don't know. That's one of the things I don't know. Your parents would normally, if there was just one of you, your parents would say, "Well, you dreamed it." Right. But there were two of us, and we both saw the same thing, and we weren't talking about it or anything. So we both, experienced the same thing. But we don't know why we both woke up at the same time. She woke up at about the same time. I think she knew I was awake, but I didn't know she was awake. But we both woke up at the same time, and I don't know why. And then suddenly we just became terrified out of our minds at the same time. And it was real terror. And I don't know, I thought maybe there was some kind of mind control going on, was the only thing I could think of.
Well, it certainly seems significant, because that's the age where contact often starts with people who have regular contact throughout their lives.
Did you become terrified, as you knew your sister was awake? Is that when it hit you, or before?
It was right when the thing. She said it just disappeared, and I thought it kind of exploded, but I don't know what happened. But suddenly, we both just became terrified. We both started screaming and running out of the room at the same time. So I know we were both terrified at exactly the same time. Right. But we didn't know anything about UFOs or anything. Right. We didn't know what it was.
Right.
And before that, we weren't even scared.
Right. That'll do it. If it was doing something outside your reality, it would terrify you. So,
well, did you later talk about it?
You had a normal reaction, is what you had. So
the normal reaction when it started was I was just watching it and I was wondering what that is, and I wasn't terrified or anything. Just suddenly, wham! I was absolutely terrified, and I don't know why, but she was too.
Well, it's not too surprising. It can be, like Dolly says, it's the unknown, which I think we have an automatic fear reaction to that. But I'm wondering, did you ever talk about it afterwards with your sister?
Yeah. If my parents had known about UFOs, they would have said, "Shut up, don't talk about it," because you weren't supposed to. But we didn't know it was a UFO. And so, we talked about it. my father threatened to beat us up if we didn't go back upstairs, and he didn't believe us. But he went up and said, "Oh, there's nothing in there." And so we both went up. We weren't exactly feeling like going up. But the next day we talked about it to our mother. And
Right.
then we told all kinds of people, like cousins and all kinds of people, and lots of them still remember it. And
Amazing.
the parents did too.
Is that the only experience that you remember having?
No, we had several. In fact, you know, they say that people, like you said, start young. Well, my sister and I had the experience together when we were kids, and then we had another experience together when we were older, and we both had other experiences too.
Okay.
Oh,
Did
I'd
they
love to
always
hear
involve just
one.
the light, or was it a different type of experience?
The next one we had together, I mean, we both saw some separately. We had one together that lasted about 3 days for me,
Oh,
and
wow.
several states, big, long geography of it, if you want to hear a long one.
Oh, yeah.
Go
That's
ahead.
why we're here.
Well, this is a pretty long one. It was when I was working for the DIA, so at that time I couldn't talk about UFOs or anything. But I was, this happened in Ohio, the first one, but the second one was my sister was at Brew University taking postgraduate courses, and I was working for the DIA in aircraft identification, believe it or not, and with all kinds of security clearances and all that. But we were both on the east end of the country, and we decided to go up on a vacation and see the New England states. And so two coworkers wanted to trip up to New York with me, and I took them up and picked up my sister and left them off and took pictures of everybody. And then we went on to Boston, and we were planning on staying at Boston all night, but we got there early. And so we decided to go look around some before we came back to Boston. And so we went up into New Hampshire. And later I found out we were kind of on the way where the Hill abduction took place, the end of it. But we came back down, and we came back to Boston and looked for a place to stay. And we couldn't find any. Everything seemed to be closed or filled up or things. And so we were leaving, and I was going to look around the outer belt. And as we were leaving, there was this airport, the Norwich Memorial Airport south of us, and we could see airplanes flying in, putting on their landing lights and their green and red lights on their wings and stuff. And we could see regular airplanes. And there was this other thing lower than the airplanes, and it was white and blinking. It was real white. There were no other lights. And my sister started saying, maybe that's a UFO. And I was driving, and, I'm in science and things, and so scientists explain things. And so I told her it's a helicopter with blinking its landing lights. I never seen anything like it either, but she has real good eyesight. She's a bird watcher and can practically see, a speck on a bird a mile away that I can't even see an ostrich. But anyway, she was watching it more closely than I was, and she kept saying, it looks like it might be a UFO, and I kept telling her she was crazy. And so we continued, and we got on the main Route 95. That's that route that had the big crash several weeks ago with the truck and everything. But we got on 95 from Boston. It's the main north-south route there. And there was a woods on one side. And I looked at the woods, and there was this round thing in the woods. It looked like it was on the ground or close to the ground. It looked like glass, and there was a light inside that seemed to be, it was going through a spectrum of like blue and red and purple and all shades of blue and red and purple. And there seemed to be some kind of a thing that was going around it. And I couldn't imagine what it was. And I still have no idea. But anyway, the inside of the car lit up in green.
Uh-oh.
And I looked around, I didn't see green anyplace, and the light wasn't green. I didn't know why the car lit up in green. And so we continued. And after a while, my sister began screaming at me that the thing she was watching was going to go over the road and that we should pull over. And I still thought she was crazy. And I told her, if it was a UFO, well, the fire department and the police and everything would be there and watching, and, it couldn't be a UFO. So anyway, she kept screaming at me, and I finally pulled over. And I was going to point out the window and say, you're crazy, that's a helicopter. And I looked out and pointed my hand out, and I was all ready to say that. And I saw way off a meteor, something that looked like a meteor. And then just immediately this thing came, and it was a big thing, real close, real distinctive. It had 7 square windows in a row, and it had a little green light on one end and a little red light on the other. It didn't blink. And it came close to, it was right over the trees. And at that time, I realized my sister was right and I was wrong. But she said, we didn't talk about it too much. We didn't even see each other for about 6 years because she became a missionary in Brazil right afterwards. And I got married and moved to Nevada. So it was years before we saw each other, and we didn't discuss it.
What year was this that this happened?
1968. Anyway, it wasn't something you could really discuss, especially not with my job.
Right.
But so I immediately had written down everything that happened, and she didn't know she did. And just last year, she found a letter she wrote to my mother. So we both had descriptions that we wrote immediately after it happened. But in her we didn't discuss it much later either. But in her description, she said that right after this thing appeared over the treetops, that it shone a light in our car. It was sort of a strange color. And I didn't see that, but I did see something that looked like a meteor. And then it came over, and we both got out, and it was real distinctive. I mean, it wasn't like something foggy. It was like you're just looking at a window of your house or something. And it was square windows, and there was some kind of a blinking pattern it was like the first 3 lights would blink on and off, and then all 7, and then the last 4, and then it'd repeat that or something. My sister kept saying, that's a signal. And she kept saying something about, she was trying to understand the signal. And I didn't understand any of that. But I had I had been using just a regular camera, but I also had a Polaroid that I had high-speed film for. And so I started getting all that and finding it in the car and everything, and getting it out and everything. And then I was in photography at the DIA, and so I knew what kind of a picture I could take. And I thought if I took, 2 or 3 pictures, I could get them in stereo and get this object and maybe get the freeway. And it'd be a perfect picture of a UFO. I mean, it just proved that it existed. Plus, we thought the light was coming from the inside. And so I was very anxious to get a picture. And so I had everything set up, and this truck driver pulled over in front of us and came up. And right when I was ready to take the picture, he stood right beside me and said, "What are you doing?" And so anyway, and I was scared to take the picture because this man was standing beside me. And so I pointed at the thing and said, "There it is. What is it?" And I didn't say UFO or anything. I just acted like it was an airplane. And then he just rotated around, looked in the opposite direction, and said, "I don't see anything." And, at that point, I was kind of nervous. And so he said the same thing again. "What are you doing?" And this big thing was, right there. And I was missing a picture. And so again, I pointed at it and said, "What's that?" And again, he just rotated around. He looked in the exact opposite direction and said, "I don't see anything back." And then he sort of gave me this motion, like, I don't remember exactly. I think he pointed to his head or something, like I was crazy. and went back to his car. Well,
Wow.
at that point, I just missed the most wonderful picture you could ever imagine. And in my sister's write-up, one of hers, she said that that I seemed to take a real long time to get my camera ready. And so finally last year I asked her, did she remember talking to this man? And she said, no. And so, you know, so the whole thing was pretty weird there, but I didn't know. I thought she was talking to the man. I thought she knew he was there. But anyway, she also said that when I was talking to the man, that the object suddenly was in another place. And I didn't notice that until I read her write-up years later. But at that time, I'd been able, you know, I was just able to get this perfect picture. And when he left, the thing was some distance away. And I was afraid I'd get lens flares from the freeway. And so there was a hill nearby, and I ran up the hill, and there was a bald spot on the top. And I took 5 pictures and only one turned out, and I didn't understand it at first at all. But I came back, and the thing, it was farther away then, and it flew over the airport, and it began to circle the airport. And it would, from south to north, it would turn its lights on twice. North to south, it would go so fast you couldn't even imagine it. You just sort of knew it went in a semicircle. It kept circling and circling. And at that time, I thought I heard something like, I mean, I'm sure it was going faster than the speed of sound, but at that time I heard something like a jet, but it didn't sound like it was in phase with its motion, so I didn't know exactly what was going on. And then, so I was real anxious to get a picture, and she was looking through the window the whole time and trying to figure out why she couldn't see anybody inside it, because there were these big windows and they were square, not like airplane windows. And the thing made no noise whatsoever, and it could go so fast you couldn't even see it, or when it went over the road, it was real slow. And so I decided to go down the freeway and come to the next intersection and turn my car around and go back, because I thought it had been going south, but I thought it was going to go north. I don't know why. But I did that, and the truck driver drove right in behind me and began to chase us. And I thought he was going to kill us. If I switched lanes, he switched lanes. If I slowed down, he slowed down. If I sped up, he sped up. And I finally just floored it, and he just stayed right on my bumper, and he was shining his bright lights down in my mirror. And I couldn't see anything. And I thought we were, you know, finished. And, you know, I said goodbye to my sister and asked her to look behind and see if she could see anything. And she said no. And so I decided to go on the left-hand lane and then swerve at an intersection real fast across the right-hand lane. And maybe I'd get rid of him. And I tried that. It was real dangerous because somebody's coming faster than us on the right-hand lane, we'd get killed. But I did it and got off and, you know, turned around, came back. The thing was still circling the airport, but then it started going toward the northwest. And the roads kind of went north and south and east and west. So I had to, you know, skip a road here and there and follow it. And finally I was on this really old, miserable gravel road that was so bad you couldn't hardly drive. The houses were a long ways away from each other, and there were bumps and everything. It was gravel, and it was just a little bit faster and I could drive, and it just kept going a little bit faster and I couldn't speed up. I finally just gave up and turned around and came back, and then we drove all the way back. It was a 24-hour drive. We drove all the way back to our dormitory and went to sleep. And then that morning we called our parents and told them. Her roommates didn't believe us at all and told us we were crazy. But anyway,
You
we were in our 20s.
in your 20s. And you didn't have any outlet to report that to anybody, or at the time, even with your job?
Well, I wouldn't have said anything about it at my job, but there was more to it than that, though.
Okay.
I was supposed to pick up the two coworkers, and I stayed there until late at night waiting for them. And for some reason, they knew where I was because I'd taken pictures of them standing out by my sister's dorm with her. But later that week, they both were really mad at me and said they couldn't find me and they didn't know why I didn't pick them up. Well, I waited until night, and then I drove back to Washington, D.C., and then I had a poltergeist experience. And it was scary, too. And then I woke up and went to work. But so far as reporting it, with my job, I was pretty nervous about reporting it. And so I went to a payphone and reported it. I didn't know really where to report, and I found UFO in the phone directory, and I think it was NICAP. And so I reported it, but I didn't give my name or my phone number or anything like that because of my job. And so there was no official report, and so I don't think anything, but I had written it up just immediately afterwards. And my sister thought she reported it to Blue Book, but we couldn't find a report from her. But then, like I said, last year, she actually found she had written a letter to my mother that day and told, described it. So we had two, reports that we'd both written right after it happened. So that was pretty good.
Well, I have a really interesting question for you then. In all your years of experience now, from that moment to this day, while you're talking to us, what do you think it was that you saw?
I don't know. It was a UFO. It was definitely unidentified. Anomalous phenomena. Well, it definitely was that. But when we looked at it together, we saw the same thing. And I just found out last year that she didn't see this man that I was talking to, but she did know that he was chasing us, so she remembered that. And
well, that's certainly unusual. Did you think there was possible missing time at any point?
Yeah, I found that out too from my sister's letter, because later I reported it to Bud Hopkins, and he tried to hypnotize me and stuff. And he actually took my sister, who was living in Indiana at the time, to meet Deb Cable, and they discussed it. And he tried to hypnotize me, but I just didn't hypnotize at all. But he asked me for a timeline, and I couldn't give it to him because I talked to him, years later. But then we found that write-up of my sister's, and in my write-up, I hadn't said anything about time. I just described what happens. Well, in her write-up, she had given time. And so, yeah, it's possible we had missing time because we both thought we watched the UFO for like about maybe an hour. I mean, I thought we watched it from maybe 10 o'clock to 11 o'clock or something. And I wondered why we got back at 6 o'clock in the morning to...
yeah, I'd call that missing time.
Yeah. And it came out from her timeline that we might have watched the UFO for like 4 hours or something. So there might have been missing time. He's dead, so I can't tell him now, but I did discover that we might have had missing time, and I didn't know it before. I mean, I couldn't calculate it.
Well, you skimmed over one interesting part that I wonder if you could expound upon. You said you had a poltergeist experience. Was that the whole part of this whole ordeal?
Yeah, I thought it was a part of it because it happened right afterwards, but I went back to where I was staying in Washington, D.C., and I'd never heard of poltergeist. So, I mean, I was in science. I read scientific.
Right.
And I didn't know anything about ghosts or anything. And so, anyway, that night, I tried to go to sleep, and I kept hearing somebody walking in my room. It was like a man with shoes, and he'd take about 3 steps, and then it'd be someplace else and take several steps. And I was terrified, and there was a little bit of light coming through the window from the street lights. I couldn't see anybody. And several times it was close to my bed, and I couldn't feel anybody. I was really scared. And so, of all the weird things to do, I went to sleep. And then I woke up, and the alarm went off, and I thought, it's morning. And I got up and started getting breakfast. And then I realized it was dark. And I looked at the clock, and it was like 1:30. And my clock would have been set at 6:30, whatever time I woke up. And so I was terrified. and I put a chair against the door and went back and went to sleep again. Well, my alarm went off again, and it went off at 2:30, 3:30, 4:30, and I think 5:30. And the trouble with the alarm is that the little thing you turn it was broken, and I had to use pliers to turn it, and I couldn't turn it accurately with my hand, but each time it was set right exactly where it should be. I mean, right exactly, like 2:30, 3:30, right on the thing. And I tried to get it back and, just approximately twisting it by my hand. And then I was sitting on my bed and I was thinking, I've got this security clearance, and if I've just gone insane, well, I'm going to be in big trouble at work. And I was trying to, plot ways to go through my days at work and disguise the fact that I was insane, because I didn't think about poltergeists. I thought I would, my brain had gone. And so then somehow my toothbrush just flew across the room and hit the wall. And
Wow.
I didn't want to call in sick that morning. And so I didn't. So I went to work and nothing else happened. But anyway, it was pretty scary.
Well, I have a theory about this sort of thing, because this is something we see with people who've been well, I'm sure you probably ran across this in some of your own research, but people who are taken on board come back and their bioelectric field is kind of activated in a weird way, to the point where radios might fuzz up, lights go out, they start having psychokinetic activity. So maybe it was something to do with that.
Proximity. When you're with ET, you're on board with them, and they're using their abilities with you. Okay, they're not talking; they're using psychic ability with you, and it activates you a little bit. Okay, and when you come back, you're still active, and you're doing it to yourself. And poltergeist is the right word, because the poltergeist always comes from the person who's in the room. Okay, nothing outside of you is doing it, and they might have been watching you still to see if you are all right. So I mean, it can go on for hours after a contact. They'll keep an eye on you. They'll watch over you a little bit. They'll just stay with you through it, and you may have just been real active. Doing it to yourself. Yep.
Well, I figured that had, I was worried about I was insane, and I didn't know about poltergeist at that time. But, I connected it with the UFO sighting. I thought, this was weird, and maybe something else, weird was going on too. But I was still kind of nervous because of my security clearance. I mean, I was very nervous.
Oh, I can imagine. I know what that feels like a little bit.
Well, did you notice anything else that was associated with that in terms of like physically or dreams perhaps, or weird emotional reactions?
I don't know, because I hadn't read about UFOs, and like if I knew something about UFOs, I'd have checked and seen. I had real bad nosebleeds later.
Oh yeah.
It didn't start right then though. It started.
That takes a while. Yeah. Okay. Do you experience psychic events even to this day? Do you have moments where you're real intuitive, or things, or things are happening around you still?
I don't know, because being a scientist, I'll dream things and they'll happen, but I don't know if it's just coincidence or anything else, so I can't say. I mean, I do have things like that, but I don't know whether they're real or just, accidents or coincidences.
All right. Well, I have a question from chat I'd love to pop in, because I was kind of wondering this myself. It is something that I do ask other experiencers, and this comes from Chris Space Teen, who says, not sure if this will be answered or not, but the question is, were they a military family or lived near a military base or anything similar? Because there does seem to be a somewhat high incidence of military people among contactees. But you're already in the military, right? I mean,
I was in the DIA with a high security clearance, and identifying airplanes from satellite photography.
Well, I want to add to that question a little bit. Then, what did your father and mother do for a living?
Dad was a farmer, and he had an 8th grade education, and my mother had gone to college, and my father didn't like books very well. And finally he mellowed down, and my mother started writing and things. We weren't a military family at all. But my husband had worked. I married him later. I was engaged to him then. He had worked in Area 51
Okay.
for
Well,
15.
what started you off on the road to science? I mean, you've got quite a diverse resume there. Veterinary all the way into,
Astronomy and
yeah, all of
all
it.
kinds of
I'm
stuff.
just curious. How old were you when you knew you were thirsty for knowledge?
Well, I really wanted to be an astronomer even before I knew what it was. I mean, I was fascinated by the stars, and I
Yeah.
wondered, and then I became, I wanted to go into astronomy, and I always did. And I started majoring in it, but they didn't allow females in. It was male only.
You're
And so I
kidding.
couldn't get in,
Oh
but I
my
still wanted
God.
to do research, and so I got into scientific. I tried to get into astronomy in the back door because they were mapping the planets then, and so I became a cartographer, and then I wound up in the DIA, and then I got married, and we moved to Nevada, and they didn't have any astronomy department there, but I went back. I started working for the school, and got my tuition paid for and everything, and wound up getting the degree in veterinary medicine.
Wow. Did you ever do anything with that, or?
Yeah, I went to Cornell and got a postdoc, and then I was a professor for a while, and then I came back to Ohio and worked for Battelle and Ohio State University and the Department of Health, the Ohio Department of Health.
Yeah, that's amazing to me. That's absolutely amazing. Okay, so in your research with your resume and everything, when did you start heading toward researching UFOs or any of that? How did that happen? MUFON and all that?
Well, finally, after years and years and years and years and years of not talking about it, I decided to talk about it. And I guess the first thing was related to the Pascagoula thing, because when I was living in Missouri, my mother was in Ohio, and one night she called me and said, "Did you hear that noise?" And I told her, "You're crazy. 600 miles away, I wouldn't hear a noise that you heard." And so anyway, she still seemed curious. And then later, she was a skeptic and everything, but several days later, she called and said, "There's been a huge, massive UFO wave there going on in Ohio, that UFOs chased one of her friends, and the governor saw it, and everybody was staying in at night, and they kept their kids in. It was just like a war zone, the way she described it." And I was in Missouri and didn't pay attention to it, but later I was working at OSU, and I thought I'd look up, and just something to do, look up and see if I could find when she said that. And so I was looking for a noise in a big UFO flap, and there were all kinds of newspapers, and I didn't know when it was, but I just guessed it was the middle of October. And at that time, the library had actual newspapers, and I went in this newspaper room. It was like something out of, one of those movies or something, of vaults and things. But I actually found the little notice real fast about a strange sound that was heard. And I was really curious about that, and started sort of investigating, and it was heard all over a whole section of the United States, and it was the same time as the Pascagoula abduction, which I didn't pay attention to at all at that time. But anyway, I decided to write it up in a scientific journal and submitted it, and the state of Ohio seismologist was interested, and he helped me do research. And so I did research on seismographs and things, and this noise was real. It was probably the second most large in extent noise in the world, and it went from Iowa all the way to the coast of off Washington.
Wow.
And it was loud and wide, and nobody could explain it.
What
And
year
so
was it?
Huh?
What year was it?
It was 1973, October the 11th. And it was the same time as the Pascagoula abduction, which I paid no attention to at all at that time.
Anybody in the astronomy department anywhere talk about maybe an incoming meteor?
Well, no. At first, they said they explained it as a meteor, but it was on. I found 2 seismograph records of it, so I could calculate just how fast it was and things. And a meteor, none was seen, but they explained it as, one that I forget what they call it, one that dips down and flies back.
It's like going across the water, skipping rocks.
Yeah, I forget what it's called, but anyway, but you have to have a certain speed to do that. You have to be above escape velocity, and I could calculate its speed, and it was way below escape velocity. So the scientists explained it that way, but that wouldn't have been the explanation at all.
That's interesting. That's really interesting. That is really interesting. Is that the only time you ever saw anything like that or heard of it? Or, I mean, so that's pretty much what ignited your interest in what was going on?
I had seen some other UFOs.
Okay.
When I was a kid, I was sleeping outside because we didn't have air conditioning and all that. I was sleeping on a rock outside our door. This thing came over that was, it was just like a big globe or something, but it seemed like it was about the size of an airplane. Didn't make any sound. It came over, and right overhead, all the dogs in the neighborhood suddenly started barking, and our dog was locked in the kitchen where it couldn't see anything. It sounded like it was tearing up the kitchen right when it was exactly over, and it went on over. And I was really, really terrified at that time.
Wow.
I didn't say anything about it because I was afraid my parents would beat me up or something, tell me I was lying. And then another time, this was in the 1980s. I have the exact date, but for some unknown reason, I was just going through my normal life. And I suddenly got scared of UFOs, and I have no idea why. But I was so scared I would hardly go out the door. I mean, I had to go to work and everything. Mm-hmm. And so I thought UFOs are sneaky, and I won't go out in the woods. I won't go out by myself or anything. And so, I just sort of kept in the house and in the car going to work and stuff. And so anyway, I saw one at work, and I had a bunch of other witnesses too, because I saw this thing and I couldn't figure out what it was. And I asked somebody, and then we went to the office of the department, and a bunch of people saw it, including professors. And I even got write-ups from professors about it. It was in view for about like 15 or 20 minutes.
Wow.
We had any idea what it was. It was in 1984. But it was really weird because I was just, that day I had received, I decided to write my report to the UFO office at CUFOS. And I picked up the paper that day to start filling it out. And that's when I saw the UFO, and that seemed funny. That seemed pretty weird too. But then I saw it at work, and I had a lot of other witnesses, and they would even the professors wrote out descriptions of it, and I made copies of it and still haven't put in my book.
So as a professor, you were able to talk about UFOs, but while working at here, I want to pull up this comment from the chat because I think this applies. So you, as a professor, talking about UFOs was fine, but working at the DIA, Central Wisconsin, is asking why not talk about UFOs? Was that just something that you were concerned about personally, or was there an unwritten rule that while you're in the DIA, UFOs are taboo?
Well, at that time, that was in the 1960s. Well, the government was saying UFOs don't exist, and
right.
Something was crazy. And so I had a job. I had a good job. I didn't want to go out and beg on the street. And so I didn't say anything about it. Plus, I was the only female in the department. There was one other female on the whole floor. And, if I was a female to start with, and I was saying, oh, I see UFOs. Well, that would be good. So I didn't, say anything about it.
Wow. That's amazing. Well, I know we've talked a lot about your personal experiences, and I do want to get at some point into some of your research and the books you've written. So I'll just pull up one here onto the screen, which I found super interesting. This one you wrote, it's called Sacred Corridors, The Secret Behind the Real Project Blue Book, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Roswell, Battelle Memory Medal. And that's quite a long subtitle. I'm not sure I can make out the rest of that. Dr. Hynek and UFO cover-ups. This looks like a really interesting book, Irena. What prompted you to write this one? And can you talk a little bit about it?
Yeah, a lot of it came from, did you ever hear of Jenny Zeidman?
Oh, yeah. Oh, sure. Yeah, Jenny, absolutely.
A lot of it came from her material. And she worked at Battelle when they did the UFO study. Battelle Memorial Institute did the Special Report 14 on UFOs. It was a real good scientific study. Well, she worked at Battelle then, and she was working under Dr. Hynek. And actually, her job for a while was to go through all the UFO reports that come to him and pick out the good ones and tell him these are good reports. And so she was really involved, and she knew the other people that did the study. And she'd had notes that she'd taken all along, and she gave me the notes. And so a lot of my book was on her material. But also I had been at Wright-Patterson several times in the secured area. And several times my job had sent me to meetings there, to different meetings, and I had been in the secured area. And so I wasn't really exactly into UFOs then, but I was kind of. And so anyway, I didn't ask anybody. I just went around Wright-Patterson with a camera and took pictures of all the buildings and everything in the secured area. And so people are familiar with Wright-Patterson because it has a museum, but the rest of it is a secured area with chain link fences and everything. And so I took pictures and published the pictures of, different buildings and things.
Wow. That's amazing to me. That's amazing. Uh-oh. Did we lose it? Oh, there we go.
That was my first book, and that was written, I published in 2017, and it was just, I started belonging to this group that investigated UFOs, and I'd been investigating, and so I kind of covered chronologically UFOs from starting actually before the 1940s into that day's UFOs, and covered a lot of things, such as, one thing that I started out with was I had accidentally found the book by Kenneth Arnold and read it, and I found it was just fascinating, because he was the first person that drew attention to UFOs as, with the idea that they're, craft with pilots. I mean, I don't know if they are, but that was, that's what people think now. And so he was before Roswell, but not very far before Roswell. And
I'm dying to ask a question. You know a lot about aircraft. You can identify many, many aircrafts. How many times have you seen a non aircraft? In other words, non from here, that you've been able to say that is not from here versus from here?
Oh, well, just the sightings I had with my sister, that was kind of an aircraft. It was in our room. And the one I talked about that I was laying on a rock outside, and the one I had with my sister of the windows and everything, and the one I had at Ohio State, none of them looked anything like aircraft. The one from Ohio State, I had descriptions of people, and they said they told what direction it was going, and the wind was going the opposite direction, and things like that.
Yeah.
What do you think about all the recent whistleblower talk, like David Grush, and the accounts of people reverse engineering craft, and some of the stuff people are seeing now being our own? Do you put any credence in all of these accounts coming from whistleblowers?
I don't know, because you know, if the government had a UFO, I think they'd take over the world, for one thing, real fast. But for another thing, if they had it, they ought to fly it around and show it doing the same kind of things that UFOs do, and then land and take people in and have people inside it and all that. So I don't know. I mean, I know it'd be secret because I had, a job with classification too, but I just don't know. I mean, I think the government, for my work, I thought the government knew more about it than they said, but I don't know how much they know about it.
Right. Yeah. Well, it's kind of the way I feel. I mean, I've talked to a few whistleblowers myself, so I suspect there's quite a bit going on behind the scenes. But yeah, unless I talk to them personally, it's hard to comment on. So I totally understand that. But okay, I'm going to pull up another book because I do want to get to your recent books. But here's a really interesting book you wrote called Inside the Lightning Ball. This is the scientific study of lifelong UFO experiences. So can you talk a little bit about why you wrote this book and what it contains?
Well, they always say scientists don't see UFOs. I mean, that's the common idea that, scientists are opposed to UFOs and just, nuts see UFOs. And they, say, well, scientists are logical people. They, just think logically. And so they don't see UFOs. And I had a lot of scientific training, and I saw UFOs. And I thought I had other witnesses and things, and even had pictures. And I published one of my pictures in a scientific journal. And I also wrote up the thing about the sound in a scientific journal. So I had several things in scientific journals. And that was just my own experience. And I also included other, the information from other people that were in science that saw UFOs too.
Very, very interesting. Yeah, well, you've certainly been busy in this field. Now, I do have to take a quick station break. So if you'll allow me to do that for just a second. I want to thank everyone out there who is listening and watching. You are watching The Light Gate. I'm Preston Dennett. My lovely co-host is contactee Dolly Safran. Our amazing guest is Dr. Irena McCammon Scott PhD. And I want to give a huge shout out to United Public Radio Network. We're streaming on them on 107.7 FM and UFO Paranormal Radio Network at 105.3. We're on numerous other platforms, Facebook, Rumble, Roku. Is that it? Roku.
Yes.
And of course, YouTube. And yeah, we're on our second hour. I see some of the questions in chat. I know I really want to dig into a little bit onto the Charlie Hicks and Calvin Parker case, because I saw you done 2 books on that, co-wrote with Dylan Mandel or whoever it was. You'll let us know. But yeah, here I'll just pop up the next question in chat because we get a lot of questions, and I always like to say no questions are, all questions are allowed. So here is one from L, and I like this question. And she says, please, Irena, do you experience a lot of synchronicities in your daily life?
I don't know. Sometimes I do, and sometimes I don't. And there's just no way to figure out whether they're coincidences or whether they're real synchronicities. And so I don't know. That's a dumb answer. I don't know.
No, that's fine.
Well, as a scientist, have you ever
Okay, let's
considered
see.
checking yourself out for being psychic? Have you ever taken a test or delved into reports that people have about being psychic and being able to hear what they're saying mentally, that kind of thing?
No, I never did.
You never did. Oh, wow. Okay.
Okay, I'm trying to pull up another of your amazing books. Hold on a second. You've got so many. I lost track of the file here. Let me just pull this up because I want to get into, here we are. I want to get into the whole Pascagoula incident, which is has had such a huge impact. And here is the book. Let me see. Let me just pull this up that you co-wrote with Philip Mantle.
No, I wrote one earlier, and then I'm co-writing one with Philip Mantle, but it's not published yet. That'll come out later. But
this is the one that's coming out later? Oh, okay.
Yeah, this one's coming out later. It's not published yet. I mean, it's not released yet.
I guess we will save that for the next time you're on. But here is the one. This is
that's the one. Beyond Pascagoula. And it's about Kelvin Parker and Charles Hickson and the Pascagoula incident.
Let me see. I think I have. Oh, wait, hold on. I'm getting all kinds of lovely pictures.
Looks like Travis Walton.
Recognize him.
Yes.
Hold on. That's not the picture I'm wanting to show. Let me pull up the other ones. But so yeah, just tell us about your research into the Travis Walton case.
Okay.
I mean, not the Travis Walton, the Pascagoula case. Sorry.
Okay. Well, the reason, what kind of started me in it was that sound, and that happened exactly at the same time as the abduction. But I did research on the sound, which is more or less physical research, scientific research, and then many years later, I mean, a couple of years ago, I had published a couple of books with Philip Mantle, and he was interviewing people that were down at Pascagoula at the same time as the Pascagoula abduction. And he wanted somebody in the United States to interview him, and he asked me. So I got thrown into that for two different reasons. And I've interviewed a lot of people that were connected with that. Should I introduce what happened with Pascagoula? Yeah, that's a picture.
Yeah, sure.
This was something unexpected. These two men were just out fishing. They were employees of a shipbuilding company. And the older man was in his 40s and the younger man was a teenager. They were both working and they were family friends. The older man was friends with the younger man's father and vice versa. And the younger man and his son were just real good friends. And so they had finished their day of work and they decided to go fishing, which they're down at Pascagoula, which is by the Gulf, and there's a big river there. I guess that's what you do is fish when you're down there. And so they had no interest in UFOs or anything. They were just going fishing. And they looked at one place and then went to another place. They didn't, UFOs weren't a subject of anything to them. And they were out, with their fishing gear fishing. And this thing came. They had, the younger man had his car, and they had parked some way from the pier, and he wasn't real thrilled about going to the pier because there was a lot of trash and weeds and things, and there was a no trespassing sign. He was afraid the police would get him. And so he told the older man, you know, if you get in trouble, it's your fault, not mine. You can go to jail and everything. And, you know, so anyway, they went, and that's the pier. They went out on the pier and began to fish. And then they saw this blue light, and it was kind of the same color as the police, you know, the blue light on on police cruisers.
Right.
And they thought at first it was the police, but then it was really, really a lot more horrible than police, because this thing came. It was a UFO, and it was sort of levitating. And suddenly it opened up, and these things came out. And that's the picture they drew of it. And two of them grabbed the older man, and one grabbed the younger man. And they kind of levitated them into the thing. I mean, this was totally unexpected for both of them. They were terrified. They took them in, and the guys couldn't do anything because it was like they were paralyzed. It was like they thought that somebody had given them a shot or something. And, you know, they thought maybe it's the government, but, you know, at the same time, they thought it's a UFO. And they took them both in and put them in different rooms, mm-hmm. and laid them back. And they couldn't see much at all because it was really, really bright light on the inside. Mm-hmm. And with both of them, they described these things came out of the wall or the ceiling and came down. And it was kind of like, they described it as the size of a deck of cards. Now I think you describe it as an iPhone. And like it was scanning them. And then they were laying there. They couldn't move. All they could do was move their eyes. And they were terrified, and they didn't know how long they'd been there. They didn't know whether they would ever get back or whether they were going to be captured or killed or anything else. And then the things put them back where they started from. And these were, usually people describe aliens as sort of like skinny things, and, you know, with, you know, skinny or the grays and things like that. But these things were kind of porky, and they couldn't exactly see they didn't know whether they had skin or covering, but they were kind of wrinkled. And with people, you have two ears and a nose. With these things, sort of had projections out there, like somebody just made an imitation person or something. And so the things put them back on the deck and disappeared. And the object disappeared. And what would you do if that happened? I mean, this was back in 1973 when people, if you said UFO, everybody told you were crazy and you were lying. And so, you know, if it happened, things like that happened to people, well, they didn't talk about it. And the only abduction before that in the United States had been the Hills, and they had to recall it hypnotically. They didn't remember it. Well, these two people remembered it consciously, and they discussed it and said, we're not going to tell anybody. And then the younger man was just terrified and just having a nervous breakdown all over the place. They both were. And the older man had been in the Army, and he had been in life-death situations, and he thought he could stand up to all the harassment they were going to go through. And you can imagine, you know, shipyard workers, how you'd be harassed. And so the older man decided to report it. And he tried, first of all, a newspaper. The newspaper was closed or something. And then he tried Kessler Air Force Base, which was close to there. And it was night. And Kessler said they were closed and they didn't do UFOs anyway, and told him to call the police. And so he decided to call the police. The other man didn't want anything to do with it. He was a teenager, and, you know, he didn't want to be called crazy his whole life. And so anyway, the older man contacted the police immediately, And the police came. And that's real unusual because most people, even if they remembered something like that, they don't go around talking about it because nobody believe you, even now. And back then, it's just not something he did. But this was different. And the man, he did contact the police. The police came out and got him. And they separated him and interviewed them both in separate rooms, which was a real intelligent thing to do. Then the police didn't want to be made fun of or, been used or anything. And so they put him in the same room, but they hid a tape recorder. And they thought, if these people were in the same room and nobody was there, I mean, they first of all talked to him in the same room and then the man left. And so they thought if they were hoaxing, well, they would be laughing and saying, well, we really put it over. Well, the two were just absolutely terrified. And the tape recording still exists and it's on the internet. And you can tell, how they felt by their voices.
Yeah, I've heard that actually. It's very compelling.
Yeah. I mean, they were terrified out of their minds. And the one was praying and everything. And so that made the police believe it. And they went home that night and came back, and somehow it got out. They didn't really want the world to know about it, and, but somehow it got out, and there was all kinds of telephone calls and everything else coming into their work in the morning. And so they were then questioned by professional people like colonels and things, first of all at a hospital and then at Air Force Base. And everybody thought they were sincere. There wasn't anybody, that even though it was something weird, that they were very convincing as being, something really happened to them.
Wow, amazing. Yeah, I mean, this is a landmark case for sure. I think it's one of the top 10 best verified cases, people who have been taken on board. And I know there was a book that Charlie Hickson wrote with Dr. Mendez, and he had follow-up sightings afterwards. Now, is that true also with Calvin Parker, that he had following us?
Yeah, I think he had at least one in 1993.
Oh, wow. Very interesting. Yeah, well, it's truly an amazing case. So what was it like to, speak with him, and, he's such a huge figure in this field right now. And I'm sure it's difficult for people to go forward. And I've heard him speak. He seems like this affected him really profoundly.
It did, because I interviewed his wife, and when that happened, they were engaged, and, it was like people were wondering whether she was going to marry him because he was a UFO person. And it didn't bother her at all. She, was in love with him, and they got married. But she said he didn't talk about it for years until about 2018, and it happened in 1973, and he didn't even talk about it to her. And right after it happened, he had a nervous breakdown and went to the hospital and things, but he didn't talk about it to anybody for a long time. And then his wife had encouraged him, and Philip Mantle had encouraged him. Now he's glad he talked about it.
Wow. All right. Now, if I could, I'd like to because the questions in chat are stacking up, and it's always fun to interact with people who are listening and watching. So here's a question, which I think I could probably answer myself, but I don't know. This is from DGK. Did Dr. Scott's work include handling or cataloging items found inside a saucer? I think it was June Crane who was famous for doing that, and she stepped forward practically when she was near to passing away. But yeah, did you ever have any involvement with that in any way?
No. I mean, somebody gave me something that they said was a UFO, from a UFO and stuff, but I never did anything with it.
Oh, all right. That's pretty interesting. Well, here is another question, if you don't mind, because some of these are a little bit off topic, but this is kind of interesting because you did talk about you and your sister having experiences together, and then she went off to Brazil. And Maggie Smith is asking, did your sister have any odd things or sightings when she was in Brazil?
Yeah, she did. One night, she was a missionary, and she was working with several other missionaries, and she and this missionary were in this really bad road where you couldn't pass anybody or anything. It was like a trail, and they were in a 4-wheel drive. And she said they saw somebody coming, and that the man drove off the road so the other person could get by because they saw this light coming. And then they said it just disappeared, that nobody was there, even though they'd seen that. And they were scared, and the man drove back on the road and drove back. And she said he never talked about it after that.
Wow. Amazing. Yeah, Brazil is all about UFOs. It's got a lot of activity there. All right, here is a question from Doxy, which maybe, Dolly, you could answer. I don't know if you're able to answer this, Irena, but it's certainly an interesting question. I've been asked it, and I don't know the answer to it. But Doxy is asking, has anyone worked out which craft goes with certain types of extraterrestrials? I hate calling them aliens.
That's not a thing. There are certain types of crafts, and any type of ET is capable of using them. It's sort of like if we had a fleet of different vehicles, or all our air forces had planes and we sell them or we trade them back and forth. That's how it is with them. They're specific types, and it's more for the mission and what they're used for. It doesn't matter who's flying it. So that's why.
All right. You have any comment on that, Irena?
To me, I don't know. So.
Yeah, I have not been able to note any correlation. So what you're saying, Dolly, makes sense to me. But here is a good question from Allison Carr, because I'm wondering, Irena, how you feel about hypnosis and having possibly experienced missing time yourself. I had a missing time incident, and I'm reluctant to go under hypnosis. I kind of want to remember spontaneously. But Allison Carr is asking, I wonder if she's tried hypnosis to see why she was, I think, scared of UFOs later. And the follow-up question is to that, would you try hypnosis to see why you became afraid of UFOs?
I tried, Bud Hopkins tried to hypnotize me, and then I went to 2 doctors too. But I just don't hypnotize at all. I mean, absolutely nothing happens to me under hypnosis. So it just doesn't work. I mean, it'd be nice if, I hypnotized and I remembered all these things and knew what happened and all that, but it doesn't work on me.
No, it didn't work on Dolly either. So,
No. I know why. I don't know if they explained it to you or not, but I'm completely conscious all the time, and I am fully in control of myself. And it's like the person who tried to hypnotize me told me point blank that I could probably recall anything on my own. I don't need anybody to help me. I just need to be able to relax, center myself, and then replay it as if I'm watching it on a movie screen, so that the memories all congeal and they come back to me. And that's exactly what I did before when I was trying to figure everything out, and that worked for me. Do you have an eidetic memory, Irena?
A what memory?
An eidetic memory. Do you have a savant ability to remember things in weird ways?
Photographic memory.
Photographic memory, yeah.
Oh, I don't know. I'm kind of good on academic things, but like my sister and I had, we might have had missing time twice, but neither one of us remembered of anything happening during our missing time.
Yeah.
And, if we have a subconscious mind, it hasn't erupted to, we're not in contact with it anyway.
Okay. Well, that's why I asked you if you had used any psychic abilities. From what you're saying, you have them. Everybody does. But sometimes we just don't explore them. We leave it alone. And that's how you reach memories like that. You're talking to your superconscious, who you really are. Your physical mind isn't in contact with that which you remember anyway, your consciousness. It's not unconscious, it's true consciousness, it's your superconscious. And all you have to do is just let it go. But you're in control of yourself, and some people won't let go of that at all. You're just not interested. So
well, I'm interested and I'd like to find out, but it doesn't work on me.
Well, I know that. Well, what I'm saying is you'd have to do it for yourself. You'd have to learn to meditate and, get focus in your mind and then walk yourself through it. In other words, you don't want to share it with anybody else. You just want to be the one to do it. It works that way. Trust, it does. You should give it a shot.
Our meditation can work, writing it down again and trying to pull up different details.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, having experienced it myself, I would like to know. I really would. I haven't tried hypnosis. I think it works. But I did get to meet Bud Hopkins as well. A very nice man, but never really pursued it. So here is another question, and this one is from Fun Talks TV. And I think this is an interesting question because you being very scientifically minded and being exposed to so many people who are having ongoing contact, like Dolly. And so what do you make of all these people who are claiming UFO encounters and going on board and all of this? Do you feel like the onboard experience is a valid experience? I guess this is what Fun Talks is kind of leaning towards.
Well, I have a real open mind on this subject because of, having close encounters ourselves. And besides that, just last year, I found out that I was talking to this crazy man and my sister didn't know he was there. And I'd never asked her about that. I mean, I sort of wondered. And so, there was something really weird going on.
Right.
And neither my sister or I remember anything about an abduction or anything.
Yeah. You might not have met the right hypnotist yet. Sometimes hypnotizing takes months before you actually start to get down into it enough to be able to recall. And it can't just be one session, and you have to practice at it for a while and get really good going under with someone that you trust. And once you reach that level of consciousness, where you're opening up to it, then it'll hit you, pow. But it can't just happen in one session for some people. And maybe that's, maybe you should consider that. Finding somebody who's willing to work with you for a few months and teach you how to go under. Because that's the whole point of you letting go so that you recall. Some people have to, my mom did it. Doctor took forceps and he put it in between her thumb and her fingers so she would feel no pain. And when she finally got to the point where she absolutely didn't even know they were on her, he said, "We're ready to begin." And that's when they started regressing her. And it takes a while to reach that level of, going under. You might try it. Try to find a better, I don't know. Preston knows a lot of people who do this. You should ask him to give you an idea who to talk to.
Well, I generally don't recommend hypnosis for people unless they're absolutely dead set on doing it or having anxieties. There's a very clear-cut case of missing time, which I think you probably do, but yeah. Well, okay, the chat is loving you, Irena. Doxy just wants to say thank you for speaking out and helping us all understand what's been happening. So very much appreciate your good work.
Thank you.
I know.
But here is a question from Neural Channels. I certainly have my own opinions about Bob Lazar and some of the stuff he's put forward. I think he's legit. I really do, because I've talked to contactees who said, yes, what he described is, what I saw on board a craft. I know Dolly has talked about this. Some of the stuff he said, she says, that's scientifically accurate. So you don't have to comment on him if you prefer not to, but Neural Channels is asking, what is your take on Bob Lazar, and have you ever met him?
No, I don't know. I think it's quite logical that the government is trying to back engineer UFOs, and so there's people doing it and all that, but I don't know whether they've done anything. I don't even know if UFOs are technological things or what they are. So I'm sure they're working on that, but I don't know. I mean, my husband worked at Area 51 too. He didn't know Bob or anything, but
So you're not allowed, I think there was a question back there, which I kind of skipped over. You being married to someone, you're not allowed to discuss anything top secret, even with your spouse. Is that correct?
Well, my husband's dead now. He died several years ago. And since he died, I can think of all kinds of questions to ask him, but I didn't ask him when he was alive. So I'm a little late on things.
You didn't leave a note or anything, write something down, a journal. Oh my God. Oh,
that was pretty stupid. I should have thought of all those questions, when he was alive, and I didn't.
Well, we get to ask you questions, and here's a good one from M. Wing. And he's asking, what is the strangest experience you have ever had? That could be a lot of things.
Well, that first UFO thing was in our bedroom was pretty strange because, it seemed like there was probably some mind control involved. But this is just a little tiny thing. It didn't seem like much of anything. It made me think that UFO phenomena can just take any form. It might look like a spaceship, like a UFO, or it might look like an alien or something. And maybe we're kind of primitive, and the universe is above us, and maybe they can just show us anything. One strange experience was you asked about synchronicity and things. Oh, when I was a kid, there was this big picture in my relatives' living room of this man called John Purdue. And I thought it was an oil painting that my relatives had bought. I didn't know anything about John Purdue. And my great aunt died, and the night she died, this picture disappeared off the wall. And I couldn't figure out, it was a big picture and it was always there. And my parents, I didn't know she was going to die that night. My parents were in with her, talking to her and her daughter. And I was in the living room where the picture was, and there was no picture. And I just couldn't understand. I went over and felt the wall.
wow.
And the wallpaper was a different color and everything. And then later we went home and she died, and they had a funeral. And after the funeral, we came back to their house and the picture was up. And I couldn't understand that. And I asked everybody, and they said, oh, the picture was up the whole time. Well, anyway, years later, my mother went through all their paper and found all this John Purdue stuff. And it turned out John Purdue was the founder of Purdue University. He was a big famous person, and that's why there was an oil painting.
Oh.
And I had all this material. And so I wrote up a book on John Purdue, and Purdue University published it. And I was thrilled to death. But that happened way, way back before I knew who John Purdue was. And I was always sort of nervous that maybe John Purdue was telling me not to write a book about him or something.
Wow.
Well, that's certainly interesting.
Well, that was a weird, something weird that happened once.
Yeah. I'm dying to tell you this. I want to give you a hint about your first experience that you remember. The light.
Uh-huh.
One way that the ET use on children when they're coming in contact with you first time, and they want your attention, and it's like hypnotizing you. You know how a hypnotist will sometimes use an object and wave it in front of your face, and you're supposed to follow it with your eyes. They were literally showing you the light and spinning it around. It's a way to get your brain to focus onto the light. It opens you up to suggestion, and they were in the room with you already. You just couldn't see them. And that's how they brought you down, so that you could go with them and then come back. So I am positive this happened to you. And
yeah, I think something like that happened because there wasn't any reason why we both wake up at the same time, but we
right.
did.
Exactly.
And this was in the room with us.
You went together. They hypnotized you. Okay. They brought you out and they brought you back, and you just happened to wake up at exactly the same time. That is a common tool that they use on small children. So, and I know of it. So, I mean, I'm telling you, they did that. You really do have missing time. You went with them and then came back.
Well, that thing, that I wondered about that is just mind control. And why do they do it to kids? Why don't they do it to adults when you're,
Adults are less likely to go blank when they see something they don't understand. You were young, you had never seen anything like that before, and it was easier to get you to drop what you were thinking so that you could be contacted.
but you're below the
Yeah,
age of
adults are more jaded. They'll go with that and they'll attack. Children don't do that. So yeah.
Well, we'd never heard of UFOs or anything.
Right.
So
We had no clue. You're innocent and you went right under for them. That's exactly what they did.
even before that, I can remember having really bad nightmares when I was like 3 years old of these round things that were chasing me,
Mhm.
and I was terrified. But
Wow.
so maybe something happened earlier than that.
Oh yeah. If you're contacted and you're really young, it probably started when you were really, really young. That's the pattern. And so they've been watching over you for a long time.
So I was glad my sister was there, because otherwise, everybody tell me I was crazy and I, dreamed it, but
Not at all.
she was there and she remembered.
Common experience. Yep.
Yeah. Well, I was going to ask you about dreams. You mentioned nightmares, which is another red flag. But moving forward, like after that major experience with your sister and the UFO and the highway, and did you have any dreams about that incident or any other dreams of being on a craft? Because that's definitely one of the things that a lot of contactees have. And you're kind of ticking the boxes, Irena. I think you are a contactee. I'm just saying.
Well, I've dreamed, about being in UFOs, but that was after I heard about UFOs. Before that, I had just dreamed about round balls. And before I found out about UFOs, I dreamed about things in the sky and things. And I'd wake up and I was just so terrified you couldn't believe it. I mean, I was just terrified. But, you'd think you were terrified because you were thinking it was a UFO and it was, an alien or something. Well, I had no idea why I was terrified. And then when I found out about UFOs, it seemed less terrifying because I could just...
You had an explanation for it at that point. Yeah, knowledge is power to your mind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
that's amazing.
It worried me that, there might be mind control going on. And
it's just to relax you.
Horrible.
Yeah, it's not mind controlling what you're thinking. It's just to relax you, to get you into a state of, acceptance and calm. Their biggest worry with the human race is that you get on board and start trying to kill them, and they don't want that. Even children will fight. And so they get you calm so that you can see what's going on, you understand, and you'll follow them and go with what they're asking you to do, and then they bring you back. And most people, when they want hypnosis, it's just because they're looking for the explanation of what happened to them. And it's terrifying not to know. I understand that. Okay. I really do. It lingers with people. And if you can shine a light on the experience and open it up and see it for what it really is, then that fear just goes away, because then you realize, oh, okay, that's what happened. And
well, I view fear as something telling me that something's dangerous. And I had a lot of fear.
Did you ever have anything happen to you?
So I wondered when they took it away, but is that a good thing, or should I be alert to something that's really bad?
No, fear is unknown. In other words, you're fearing it because you don't remember. If you could have remembered, you might not have been afraid. See what I'm saying? Did you ever come home with a bruise, a cut, something bad? Did you ever physically get ill? Anything like that? Do you ever have any of those memories? No.
Last year, I had a real bad leg injury. I just woke up and my leg turned purple and my knee was swelled up to about twice its size, and the doctor pulled these syringes of blood out of it, and they did an MRI, and I had like tendons frayed and ligaments pulled, like something had twisted my leg and pounded on it, and I had no idea what happened.
And you don't know what happened? Wow. That's interesting. So you don't know if you don't know if you had a nightmare or something?
I didn't do anything. I'd been working on my computer until that happened, and nothing happened to me. And I had all that happen, and I had no idea what happened.
Wow.
But it was like they said it was like a football injury, that like somebody pounded on my leg and twisted it and all kinds of things. I don't know.
Hmm.
I took physical therapy for like nearly a year.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
That's amazing. That is amazing. Wow.
I'm not even sure what to make of that.
I know. If it was me, I'd really be going for trying to remember at that point, try to explain why would you have an injury waking up, I've had I had an injury once waking up, but I know why it happened. Somebody attacked me I was drugged and attacked. So I don't know. That's amazing.
Hard to say, but I want to pull up some of the pictures that I found online, Irena, because you've rubbed elbows with a lot of the big people in this field. Here is Kathleen Marden.
Kathleen Marden is just a wonderful person. She helped me with all kinds of things.
Yeah.
And she's the nicest person you could ever imagine. She's really hardworking. She's really sincere. And she's the niece of Betty Hill.
Right.
And she's just a wonderful person.
Yeah, I was on a show with her on a panel, and yeah, it was awesome. I really enjoyed being on the show with her. And it looks like you got to meet Whitley Strieber as well.
Whitley, yeah.
He's totally impressive. And, the things he talks about, they're just amazing. And he has the courage to talk about it. And, people call him crazy. So what?
And what was your impression of Travis Walton?
I just met him briefly. I mean, he seemed like a pretty nice person to me, but I didn't know him very well. I mean, he impressed everybody else that way too, as being, really nice.
Right. And here, of course, this is Stacy Wright from Phoenix MUFON.
A wonderful person.
Yeah, I spoke for her group once. Once I had to cancel, I was very sick, but I very much enjoyed meeting her. And this, of course, is Tom Carey of Roswell fame. He's a very famous Roswell researcher. What's your take on Roswell, and what was it like to meet Tom Carey?
Oh, I was totally impressed. I was just amazed. And, you'll talk to, I see him as, like a god or something. But like me, nobody. So I was really impressed with meeting him and everything, and really impressed with his work too.
Yeah, I think the Roswell case absolutely happened. I mean, there's close to 100 books on that case. I'm not kidding. It's clear. They've interviewed everyone from beginning to end of that incident. It's not a mogul balloon. I'm absolutely convinced that was a genuine UFO that is in our possession. Which brings me to the next person you've met, who is Clifford Stone, who's, of course, very well known for talking about crash retrievals. So did you get a chance to talk to him, or what is your impression of the whole?
Yeah, I talked to him, and I was in his house, and I was in his room with all his material. And but I didn't ask him the stupid question I should have asked him. I should have asked him, I mean, this would be a dumb thing to say. And of course, the answer is this really true and things. And I didn't ask him that. Instead, I just talked about the government and hiding things. And he just had files and big files of material about, the government and hiding things and that sort of thing. I mean, he was real impressive, but I didn't ask him the things I should have asked him.
Wow. Holy mackerel. That's funny.
All right. Well, here I've got some more questions from chat, and here's kind of an interesting question from Raul Melendez. He says, I would like to know, Irene, what are you learning from your experiences? There is a purpose for this. So I guess that's a pretty philosophical question and with no easy answer. But yeah, I mean, this is a big life journey for you. I mean, how do you feel about it?
Learning is from that very first experience with the thing in my room. I thought there was mind control. And thinking about it, at first it didn't understand it at all because we didn't know anything about UFOs or anything else. But it seemed to me that, you know, this tiny little thing was in the room, and there seemed to be mind control involved. And I think that, you know, with the quantum theory and things, maybe things like size and length and things like that don't really exist, even time, that they're just things that we categorize our, you know, our life and experiences that way. But it may be that reality is a whole lot more complicated than we could ever imagine. And like there was this little tiny thing in our room, but it seemed to be able to affect our minds. And so, you know, I think whatever the phenomena is, that it can make you see anything. And I worry that, you know, people talk about abductions, well, maybe abductions are a screen memory for something worse. I mean, I don't know. It just kind of worries me that our minds might be under, you know, control.
All right. Yeah. Well, here's a question from Neural Channels. And I mean, in your bio, it says you did take the test to become a MUFON field investigator. So did you actively investigate cases for MUFON? Because Neural Channels is asking, what's the most memorable MUFON case you've investigated?
Well, I used to be an investigator, and then somehow I lost the thing. I took the test way back, and so now I'm not an investigator, although I'm investigating with, I investigated all kinds of things. The most interesting one that I investigated happened in the 1990s, and it was with some other people. It was near Logan, Ohio, and it was these people that kind of lived out in the country, and they saw these red lights flying over their cornfield and all around. And they called all kinds of people. They called Wright-Patterson, they called the sheriffs, they called the TV and the radio, and everything reported them. And the things kept flying around. One of them followed a car along the road, and after they did all this reporting, there was a plane that started flying a grid over top of them. And one of the things flew up and followed the plane, and they had policemen come out, and the policemen had no idea what happened or what was going on, and the policemen watched the thing too. So it was really an interesting report because the authorities came out and investigated, all kinds of people investigated, and things kept flying around. And then, you know, later that night they disappeared, but usually, like with a lot of UFOs, there's just, they'll report they'll see something flying across the, you know, and it's over with. Well, these had investigators and everything there.
Was it just 2 red lights?
No, it was several red lights. They were flying over a cornfield.
Okay.
And then something else, you know, you asked about synchronicity. Something else that happened funny was that happened years ago. And several people went out and interviewed him and everything. And then sometime later, another person and I went out and interviewed him. And after we left, they had another experience of that. And I thought, what a disappointment, you know, because we left and then they had another experience. Well, then sometime later, this was more recent, I had another UFO thing that it wasn't a real big thing, but it was in my yard right here, and of seeing a UFO that seemed to be like they called it the dancing lights or something. And I was standing out there taking pictures of the planet with a camera in my hands, and this thing came by, and I didn't take a picture of it, which is totally stupid, but I had another camera. And later, the sky just sort of went into like it was fireworks, and I got pictures of that with a video camera. But several years later, I looked at the date, and the date was just exactly so many years to the day of when this man and I had been out talking to him. And I thought that was really synchronous.
Yeah, that is a synchronicity. Yeah, that was a deliberate one. That's amazing. That's
Yeah,
amazing. Where are you living now? Where did you see this?
right here in my yard.
Okay, in
I
Nevada.
didn't have a witness, so I didn't go into it a lot like everybody, like the other ones where I had another witness.
Wow.
But I had 2 cameras, and
Wow.
this thing was right in front of me, and I didn't take a picture of it.
I know what that's like. I've seen UFOs and had a camera with me and did not take a picture. So
I guess it happens to other people. I couldn't believe I was that dumb.
yeah, I sometimes wonder if there's some design going on there. Because I do know cases where people have had a camera and lifted it up to take a picture of the UFO, and the camera powered down, or the UFO darts off or turns off.
Right.
They're aware. I remember, Dolly is a contactee with a lot of experiences and was having a lot of trouble getting pictures until she finally asked them, "Listen, I'm going public. I need at least some pictures." And they did.
They came to me.
Wow.
Yeah. Preston got to see them live, so yeah, that's pretty cool. It's proximity. In other words, they can only get within so many feet of you, and your camera will keep working. The closer they are, the less chance you have of your camera going off. And that's what was happening to me. I was like sneaking the camera in my pocket, okay, and they were coming for me, and I'd lift it up and click to take a picture, and the camera don't work. Or the film, because I was using 35 millimeters sometimes, 400 speed sometimes, and it would be totally white, just white. And it made me mad. And I could never get a camera inside either, because the environment, there's too many electrical impulses going on, EMFs, and so the camera won't work on board anyway. And I was getting bloody frustrated, and I just said one day, I have to have something. This is ridiculous. And so they started taking shots.
Wow, great.
So.
All right. Well, here is another question, which is kind of interesting. I certainly have a comment on this. This is from Fun Talks TV. And he's asking, has anyone had a similar experience where they grew a passion for the cosmos and astronomy and later evolving to ufology and close encounters? I see this occur quite often, and I'm wondering, is it just me? I have seen this actually in the other direction. People will have a UFO encounter, and then they develop an intense interest in cosmology, astronomy, quantum physics. But yeah, I think it probably is a two-way street. And that's kind of what happened with you, Irena. I mean, you were interested in astronomy from a very early age, but also having some interesting experiences.
Well, I was interested in astronomy and conscious of that, but I wasn't conscious of UFOs at that time. I mean, when I was real young, I was interested in astronomy, but I'd never heard of UFOs until later, and after I'd had several experiences with UFOs. So, I kind of wonder about that too, the same thing. And I don't know, could I be interested in astronomy because of something that happened way, way back? And I don't know.
I also find it kind of interesting that you're interested in veterinary medicine, because contactees, as a rule, have this amazing connection with the animals and really environmentalism in general. And
yeah, I agree. I mean,
that's amazing to me. So, okay, did you ever actually work as a vet, or you were just a professor and taught veterinary medicine, that kind of thing?
Well, when I was in school, we did some surgery on animals and things, but no, I never worked as a vet.
Wow.
There weren't, back a few years ago, jobs were male only and things like that. And I never even thought of myself as being a vet, even though I had the degree to do it.
Wow.
That's amazing to me.
Well, we're approaching the end of the show. We still have 5 minutes or so, but I do want to ask a few more questions. Here's just actually a comment I'm going to pop up from Maggie Smith. I'm Andy's friend that Preston met at Stacy's. Should I say hello? Sure. Hello. Gosh, that was a long time ago. So I'm not sure I remember, but yeah, I remember it was awesome. Stacy actually let me stay in her house, which was such a nice
Me too.
yeah, she's a truly wonderful lady. But here is another question from Jay Truthseeker, and I'm interested in this, asking, did you ever meet Wendell Stevens? I never did, but I did correspond with him because he had the UFO photo archives, and he was the UFO photo guy, really the go-to guy when it comes to that. And I used some of his photos in my book, UFOs Over California. I didn't meet him face to face, but yeah, he was in this field way back in the 1940s.
Wow.
So I don't know if you've ever rubbed elbows with him as well.
No.
Too
No.
bad. Yeah. A truly amazing guy. And of course, he helped publish a series of books of contactees that is different from your average, quote, abduction. Dolly, I'm sorry, I know you don't like that word. She won't use it. But yeah, he wrote a bunch of contactee accounts as opposed to the sort of abductee genre, because he felt like Dolly, like people are having friendly contact, and a lot of fear that's surrounding the subject. Part of it is misinformation and disinformation in my labs. So yeah, he's a really interesting fellow.
Yeah. I certainly understand your clearances too. I grew up military. My dad was an airborne ranger, and he was high placed, and so I lived like this my whole life. We don't talk about it. Period. The end. End of sentence. And then I did work for the military, and I wasn't allowed to say anything. And I did have an experience one night on the way to work, and I tried to talk about it and found out really fast, no, we're not going there tonight. No. I investigated the best I could, and no. It's just, and then there's NDAs, and you have to live with those, and it's just the life you live. It shuts you up, and it leaves you open to being watched. That's a question for you. Have you ever felt like you're monitored in any way, shape, or form from the jobs that you did for the government?
Yeah, Allison Carr is asking that. Did you ever run into the Men in Black?
Don't think so, or I don't remember if I did.
Okay.
Wow.
I did have. Oh, I guess it's time to go. So.
Yeah, well, we got a few minutes, but I would like to just give you a chance to promote some of your books and
yes,
talk
please
about
do.
what is going on, because you do have here Sacred Corridors, Secrets Behind the Real Project Blue Book, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Roswell, Memory Metal, Dr. Dallin Hynek, and UFO cover-ups.
Well, I was in the Blue Room, the actual building that's been identified as the Blue Room. I didn't know it was a Blue Room when I was in it, but I went to a UFO meeting in it.
That's cool.
That's very cool. Yeah, and UFOs Today. These books are very well received. I encourage everyone to check them out. Of course, Inside the Lightning Ball, a scientific study. It's really delightful, Irena, that you're able to apply, true science to this, because there's so many people out there just speculating wildly and saying things with absolutely no support, and that are absolutely contrary to basic science. So I'm really happy to see that you're putting out some information that can be verified and is really.
Are these through Amazon? Who's your publisher?
My publisher is Flying Disc Press in England, and the publisher for the Purdue book was Purdue University.
Okay.
The UFO books have all been Flying Disc Press, and we're coming out with the new one in September, which is really good. It's about Pascagoula, and we've got a whole lot of other witnesses that saw things, the same time as the Pascagoula abduction.
All right. Well, any last words you want to leave with our audience before we close up the show for tonight?
Well, I wish somebody would explain the whole thing to me. No, I mean,
but if you ever want to chat with me, I'd love to talk to you. I would love to have a conversation with you.
Yeah, I'd be interested. So great.
Okay. We will do that. I'm going to talk to you after the show. Okay.
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 All right, Dolly, I think we have to close it down now. We're pushing 2 hours. So
We've
if you
been
want
watching the Light Gate, and we were coming to you from New Orleans at the United Public Radio Network at 107.7, and the UFO Paranormal Radio Network at 105.3. We love y'all. We hope to see you again next Monday. Irena, thank you so very, very much. This has been
Thank you.
a
Thank
lovely evening. Thank you. And we want to say goodbye to all our people. See you next time. Bye.